Hello team. In this video, let's talk about why automation is so important in data centers. So cloud providers, when they build a data center, first they raise a building, like the physical building where the infrastructure will be located. Then you build racks and place servers and switches on these racks, and then you pull all of the cabling around. So it's a lot of physical work. A lot of it can't be automated. You just have to plug things in. But after you have the infrastructure in place, there's a lot more that you need to do. That's all in software. For example, for servers, switches, and routers in data centers, we need to install operating systems and hypervisors. We have to configure the operating system and the hypervisors. We have to create user credentials and install and configure remote services like the secure shell that we use to access a remote server. And then we install applications on these machines. And some of these applications might be related to management and monitoring. So there's a lot that we need to install on the machines after the infrastructure is in place. And same thing for the network. So we have to configure DNS resolvers, IP addresses for each interface in all of the servers. Maybe multiple IP addresses for each interface. And then we have to set up routes and monitoring for the network. So there's a lot that we need to configure. Just imagine configuring by hand one IP address for each of these network interfaces. I mean, it's maddening. So the scale in data centers is one challenge. I mean, there are a lot of devices, but not only devices. Data centers usually host multiple customers, and each customer has their own requests and their own differences, and accommodating all of these customers is sure to also impose demands on how you configure these machines. There are millions of services running on machines inside a data center, and these services are very diverse. For example, here we have services provided by Alibaba Cloud. I mean, the database, storage, security, enterprise application and cloud communication, analytics, artificial intelligence. I mean, there's a lot of services. And if you were to provide these services manually or manage them manually, it's just impossible. So you need automation to actually offer the services that you want. And you don't need to be one of the, very large cloud providers like Alibaba, Google Cloud, or AWS. Even DigitalOcean, which is smaller than the other three, also has multiple services that it offers. So DigitalOcean also needs automation. And finally, the cloud is in constant change. So even if we were to configure everything once and now everything is configured, this isn't enough. The set of customers change over time. So some new customers are going to come in, you need to configure things for them. Some old customers you have go away, so you need to remove their resources and free them up for the new customers. The technologies that customers are using change over time. The practices, how the customers use or manage their VMs also change over time. So everything changes over time, and we need to keep reconfiguring the cloud infrastructure. So we need automation to deal with this. So let's go over what needs to happen when someone rents a virtual machine on a cloud provider. And renting a virtual machine is one of the more basic operations that cloud providers support. So first thing, we need to choose the server where the VM will run. The server has to have enough memory and enough CPU to host this new virtual machine. Then let's assume that the server is configured, like the hypervisor is operational, so we don't need to configure the hypervisor right now. But previously someone had to configure the hypervisor. So now that the hypervisor is running, what we do is we reconfigure the hypervisor to run this new virtual machine. And then we have to tell the hypervisor how many CPUs the virtual machine has, how much memory, what type of virtual disk it will use, and the network that the virtual machine should be connected to, and so on. Then we have to configure the network to forward packets to this new virtual machine. And we might need special configuration to place the virtual machine inside a tenant's virtual network. Then we need to choose the remote server where we're going to store the VM's disk image. And then we need to configure the virtual disk to forward disk accesses to this remote server. Then we need to create a disk image with the guest OS. So the customer might have asked for a Windows virtual machine or a Debian virtual machine, Ubuntu virtual machine. We need to configure an IP address on the virtual machine so that it's accessible from the outside world. And we need to create credentials on the VM for the customer. Like we have to create an account and put the customer's public key on the VM so that he can get into the VM and start using it. And possibly, depending on what the customer requested, we might need to go on and install, applications and configure them according to the request that we got from the user. And these are some of the tasks that need to be performed. So there are many tasks, some of them take time, And there are many details to pay attention to. So if we configure something wrong, then the machine wouldn't work and we would need to keep debugging it. So there's no way we're going to do this by hand.